with an international airport. This must be in Africa. Of course, it's Rhodesia. Kariba Dam is new, a symbol of dynamic progress. But the Victoria Falls have always been there. And so has the River Zambesi. Not very many years ago, the valley of the Zambesi was one of those distant, unvisited places in Africa that you read about in books of adventure and exploration. Remote and inaccessible, the Batonka people who lived there knew little of the world beyond. Their villages were dotted along the riverbank, and each family group owed allegiance to the village chief, but was under the immediate and patriarchal authority of the family head. Here, in Chief Binga's village, was a patriarch among patriarchs, Bulawayo by name. He had 10 wives and 12 married sons. The family chores seldom fell behind schedule, for many hands made light work. There were the unmarried daughters, scores of them, helping their mothers with the women's work. Girls will be girls wherever they are. In the valley, the traditional aids to beauty were a red ochre paste for the hair, fat for the skin, and wherever there was room, beadwork decoration. Regrettably, it's only in civilized countries where the male has ceased more or less to appear in courting plumage. Custom demanded that the small children shared in the work too, for the family tasks were allotted according to age and sex. The Zambesi flows on, and 100 miles downstream from Binga, you catch up with the 20th century. The Kariba Gorge in 1956, where all the modern paraphernalia of concrete and cranes, bulldozers and blasting were shaping one of the biggest hydroelectric schemes in the world, and a dam which would hold back the waters of the biggest man-made lake ever known. But what was to happen to the Batonka people, to their villages which were in the path of the rising waters? The district commissioner, Ivor Cocroft, called meetings of each village to explain and reassure with infinite patience the 20,000 Batonka who were to be moved to higher ground. His responsibility was to plan the move. But first, the new country must be made accessible and habitable. A man-sized job. To control the scattered team of specialists under him would have been impossible without radio communication. It takes a special kind of person to do development work, living hundreds of miles from the nearest town, self-contained for months on end. If you were lucky, you would share a camp with a colleague, like these two land development officers. It was preparatory, long-range work by Land Rover or on foot over 500,000 acres of countryside. Later, they would introduce the Batonka to the use of the plow, crop rotation, and eventually crop marketing. It was hoped that such modern farming methods would shield the Batonka from the hand-to-mouth existence they had lived for countless seasons. The previous season had been particularly bad, with early drought followed by the worst flooding of the Zambesi for years. Thousands of bags of grain were brought in for them, and grain stores built at points throughout the new country. There were roads to be built. And this virgin area had particular problems of another kind. Short of surface water, the borehole drillers probed deep to bring assured supplies to the Batonka. A veterinary team experimented successfully in keeping cattle free from the menace of the tsetse fly, and a corridor 100 miles long was fenced and cleared of wildlife to hold the tsetse at bay. All traffic into the area was fumigated. The final deterrent was the hazardous job of spraying from the air during the breeding season. This, then, was the new country to which Bulawayo and the other families journeyed to choose a site for their new homes. It was an important decision, and they took their time, sizing up the vegetation and examining the soil. When the choice had been made, the advance party of each family began the work of clearing and building. For a while, the lazy days were over for Bulawayo. A home takes years to develop. This was only the necessary pioneer work to make the main move possible before the final packing up and migration from the valley. For the medical officer busy on his rounds in the valley, checking the health of the Batonka for the last time before the move, the accessibility of the new area was a tremendous advance. For there would be hospitals, clinics, and ambulances in place of endless tours over punishing terrain. The livestock people checked every beast for signs of trypanosomiasis, even before their move to the fly belt. Inoculation was a further safeguard for the herds. The day of the move drew near at last. The village huts and grain stores were emptied, and personal belongings and piles of luggage built up. Everything had to go. From the doors of the huts, patiently carved from solid slabs of valley hardwood, to the homemade baskets and the drinking gourds that grew along the river bank. Then suddenly the lorries were there, and the time had come to leave. First the goods and chattels were loaded, and then the people themselves. And this went on throughout the valley. A last look at the old home. A flash of memories. Then into the present. Bulawayo's family was on its way. The old-style African village has no material permanence. It is the tribal spirits that are permanent, and these travelled with the Batonka as they journeyed up past the hot springs where they had prayed for rain in times of drought. It was a symbolic transition, for the spirit and the tribe are indivisible. They are one. So at last, after years of planning, months of preparation, the first heavy vehicles ever to feel their way into the valley had done so, for the single purpose of emptying it. In the new land, the round of life began again. The family took up its allotted tasks as before. There was still water to be carried, but from a pump instead of the Zambesi. There was still wood to be cut, and the girls pounded and ground the grain as they had always done. The new village was already home, but there were buildings to be finished, walls to be plastered, roofs to be thatched. Life hadn't really changed very much. Kariba, after all, was only a name. The significance of what had happened meant little as yet. For Bulawayo, the meetings and the arguments, the packing and the loading were over, and the pressing need to work had passed. Once again, for him, the days were passing easily. What better on a fine morning than to drink beer with a couple of old friends and to watch your family going about the daily routine all around you? But that was all of 10 years ago. There is a closer tie with the administration. The district commissioner and his staff, including the messengers, are there to help, guide and advise at all times, and to keep law and order amongst the 30,000 Batonka now, living in an area of 10,000 square miles. The DC continues to control his scattered team on the daily radio schedule. The telephone has yet to come. The primary development officer has replaced the land development officer, but the work is much the same. The opening up of the district has encouraged Batonka men to take up work that wouldn't have been possible 10 years ago. The pace is quickening, and it's important that daily checks are made on road progress, schools, clinics, as well as village activities.
Roger, after you 382 coming over. 382 Diribalo. Zakanaka 382 unogara zakadini ikoko. Ndazimva zetu zakanaka over. Unogara zakanaka.
500 miles of road have been laid, but much of the PDO's travel is still over bush tracks, past frequent whimsical baobab or cream of tartar trees, symbols of intense heat and low altitude. There are wild animals and birds, giving moments of joy and welcome respite from the pressing needs of the work. Checking on the equipment and progress of road gangs is part of the team's great responsibility that money provided by the Rhodesian African Development Fund is spent wisely and economically. The old causeway over the Zambesi River, for example, underwater for part of the rainy season, has been replaced by the new, more practical, high-level bridge named after Ivor Cockcroft, the district commissioner who so successfully organized the move of the Batonka. Road gangs have to take time off to eat like anyone else. The cook prepares the ration of mealie meal and meat, while the rest of the gang make the many culverts and inverts necessary for all-weather roads. Rhodesian Africans, sadza, as the cooked mealie meal is called, is a must, with relish, for their daily diet. It is lunchtime too for the PDO, checking progress on the new field quarters for the administrative staff when on patrol. The architect didn't intend a hot water system of old petrol drums, but in the bush it is a practical and modern luxury. Sandwiches, a flask of tea. A few moments of peace and quiet with a relaxing view of a new irrigation dam. What more could an overworked PDO wish for? The messenger on the early morning radio schedule had been told to check at the government dispensary. Although trachoma, an eye disease caused by dirt and dust, is prevalent amongst the Batonka, the people had been reluctant to come for treatment. The messenger could now report that all was well. The patients were coming forward. The orderly's 3 years' training at the government medical training hospital had not been wasted. The report on the school may be different. Although schools are starting up all over the district, many parents are unwilling to send their daughters. Ancient prejudices die hard. After school, the children show their natural love of rhythm and harmony with a dance to reeds or antelope horn. To these people as yet, very little is meant by time. But for the administrative team, the days are too short, for there is so much to be done in efforts to lift the living standards of the Batonka. The performing of Lake Kariba has speeded up the work, for it has made many places more accessible to the DC and his staff. Prefer to keep their old simple ways, but for some, like John Boss, the new life is a good one. It took him a long time to understand that the lake has covered all the old villages and the river Zambesi itself, and at first he thought when the lake was windy and rough, it was because he was crossing over submerged rocks. When the lake is calm, the DC takes the opportunity to catch up on his paperwork. Call is at a fishing village where a nearby irrigation scheme is being started. The family are are used to visitors and go about their tasks with characteristic nonchalance. Planting maize, pumpkins, tomatoes, using the same methods they have used for generations past. But perhaps this cheerful fisherman and his family, who farm as a sideline, may be voluntary plot holders in the irrigation scheme, when they will be taught new methods to increase the yield of the land. The soil is good, but first the land must be sited, cleared and levelled in preparation for the first overhead irrigation scheme of 20 acres with water pumped from the lake. The first pilot scheme of many is underway and could completely change the agricultural pattern of the Batonka and bring them up to date with other tribes throughout Rhodesia. Wherever you look, old methods are being replaced by new. With government loans, fishermen are quick to try gill nets and metal boats, for there is a ready market for dried fish in the big towns and on the farms and mines. Bream, tiger, chaser or bottlenose, all are a popular supplement to sudza with a great many African people. There is always plenty of work to be done in a fishing village, for in between catching the fish there are damaged nets to be repaired, and the fish to be cleaned before selling to the traders. At the trading post, the fish are soaked in a solution of salt, dried and smoked before packing and dispatch. All this is new to the Batonka, but customs don't change easily, and with a day's work behind them, there is a funeral to celebrate. For a good send-off to the departed spirit, it's on with the dance. Kariba is now a fact. Uprooted from their ancestral villages, the Valley Batonka, in 10 years, have taken the first halting step towards civilization. So far they have entered merely the fringe, and are slowly adapting themselves to their new pattern of life. There are many more steps to be taken, but securing their homes with government help, they can move forward to an even more rewarding way of life.